We're going to talk about the parts of a neuron, just kind of some of the basics, so that way we can know the lay of the land before we move into how voltage changes occur in each part of the neuron. So if I've got my neuron, again, forgive my awkward whale drawing here. So here we got our little neuron. And my neuron is a cell, right? So I always have my nucleus. And we have a few major regions that we consider when we're talking about the neuron. And I always like to think about them in the terms of a conversation, right? Because the neuron is one of the ways that we communicate with our bodies. Like our bodies are going to be communicating with themselves through the neuron. And it actually does it pretty quick, and that's our fastest way of doing communication. In a different video, we'll talk about how else we can communicate and regulate the whole body. But we'll start with neurons. So if we're thinking about it in the sense of a conversation, the first area we have is called a dendrite. Dendrites, if again I'm going simplified, are the ears of my neuron. Okay, so it's listening to other things, right? So other neurons can be communicating to it, other tissues, right? So it's getting information from other cells. Then that information can be moved, right? So I've heard something, it's moving into my brain. My brain is the cell body, or the soma. And this is what I would refer to as the brain, right? This is where I can start processing. What we mean by processing when it comes to a neuron is the changes in voltage. So if we're thinking and processing, what's happening is we're balancing the change in voltage that happens throughout the neuron, okay? And all these ion changes based on the ion flow will all kind of combine here at the bottom in this little fancy region here called the axon hillock. This, I don't have like a fancy description of it or a fun analogy, but this is where the decision is made, right? The decision to communicate is made forward, right? So I'm going to decide to respond, right? So we're going to get a certain number of charges to change, and once we reach that area, if we reach that threshold, we'll decide to talk. And when we decide to talk, that signal goes down through this region here called the axon. I like to think of the axon as our voice box, right? It's right, my voice box is where I'm producing sound. That's where I'm producing the words I want to say outward, right? And so the action in a neuron is referred to as an action potential. So that action potential goes down and it reaches this final area here, okay? There's a few names, but you'll see things like telodendria. That's typically when you have more of these like finger-like projections like I've drawn here. But the most common thing you're going to see is the axon terminal, which is the end of my axon. This is, as I refer to, as the mouth. So this is where the actual sound goes out. In this case, the actual reaction takes place, however that neuron communicates. And we'll talk about how that neuron communicates in another video.